Welcome to keep your camera off. So thanks everybody for tuning in. This is the Lights Out for Birds training, our collision monitor training. And so this is the second season that most communities across Texas are doing collision monitoring. We primarily started this past spring. I think Dallas started a little bit before that, the previous fall. So yeah, thank you all for coming. I'm guessing everyone is here who is interested in helping out with a route in their cities. And I saw a lot of people from Houston, but several people from elsewhere as well. So thank you for tuning in. We will have plenty of time at the end of this for questions. So we're gonna try and get you guys all the information you can need and keep it at an hour. And we'll see how we do, because if you haven't met Richard or I, we're talkers and sometimes that's problematic. But anyway, okay, my name's Anna. I am a conservation specialist with Houston Audubon. So I help run the Lights Out for Birds program in Houston. Richard, you wanna?
I'm Richard Gibbons, conservation director for Houston Audubon. And Anna runs our Bird Friendly Communities program, among many other things. So she has put this talk together and done a fantastic job, and we can't wait to share some info.
Yeah, and I'll say we borrowed some slides from other partners too. I know Tanya Homoyan from TPWD provided the iNaturalist slides, so I will kind of show you where we have borrowed the slides. So let's dive in. All right. There we go. So just a brief overview of Houston Audubon if you have not met us before. So we are a Houston-based regional conservation organization promoting the conservation of birds and other wildlife for over 50 years now. And we have more than 17 nature sanctuaries now, kind of all across the upper Texas coast. So if you're ever in the area, we welcome you to come check one of our sanctuaries out. So the Lights Out, I just want to give a shout out to all the other partners who are involved in Lights Out Texas. We started the Lights Out for Birds program back in 2017. And the Cornell Lab of Ornithology reached out to us in 2019 asking to partner to expand it to a statewide effort. And so it was like an obvious choice. You say yes when that happens. And they brought on really excellent partners from Dallas, like the Perot Museum, and statewide organizations like Texan by Nature, who's really taken a lead role on this effort. So this is a list of the founding and coordinating organizations. And then we also have a list of all of the various organizations who are involved in Lights Out Texas for your city somewhere. So there's a number of supporting organizations, which is really exciting and has made Lights Out Texas what it is and kind of the more well-known program than it was a few years back. So I'm going to pass it over to Richard for this part.
Okay, and I'll just say advance when we need to move this slide, because I don't think I can advance that. All right, and we'll talk about the issues of primarily what is going on and why are we doing this. Advance. Thanks. All right, so Texas has an outsized importance for wildlife, and especially migratory birds. We have the Central Flyway, quite a bit of the Mississippi Flyway as well, as a lot of the circumgulf migrants, come around and hug the coast. A lot of our diurnal raptors, and of course we have lots of transgulf migrants and even migrants that are taking off from points well south of the Yucatan Peninsula and coming in to the coast looking for shelter and stopover habitat and all sorts of things. It's a lot of birds, 600 species. I guess fine. We'll move it on. Oh, that's great. Anna's keeping me moving. So to illustrate just how many birds we're talking about, this is from Dr. et al. In 2018. They took a lot of historical radar data, and they determined how many birds were moving north during boreal migration, and then also how many birds were headed south on their return to their wintering grounds. And it is a big number. We also were able to take advantage of some numbers that were more focused on our region, but the take home from this is we're talking billions of birds. And it was only with this paper that we knew just the scale of, how many billions of birds we were talking about. So it's a lot. And this is from an earlier paper that was in Living Bird, Cornell Lab of Ornithology's publication, and showing a lot of that migratory stopover importance in these hotter areas. And as you're seeing the Texas Gulf Coast, in addition to fire escapes, we also have full service hotels and what are called convenience stores. And so the fire escapes are, these tiny little lots, but that giant white blob there, that's the Columbia bottomlands. And, these are big swaths of woods that, these migratory birds can stop over. So the point is, for our region, there are a lot of birds passing through the Texas coast and then moving on through the rest of Texas. And that's a lot of birds that are put then at risk. I'm going to need more than that habitat. Help me out here, Anna. This looks like a loss of habitat slide.
Yeah, that's from my BFC slide. So yeah, but we are, we're in Houston. Houston was primarily, and most of Texas was primarily prairie. And prairie is unfortunately one of those habitats that's just super, super easy to build on. And so we have our big, expansive cities like Houston and Dallas, and even San Antonio and Austin are kind of that way as well, where we just keep building out, removing that important habitat. Sorry, this is a slide I know well, but I threw it at you.
Right.
So we end up seeing a lot of these communities.
Yeah, I like how you picked my community in particular to put up there.
But in our community.
And of course there is the Houston skyline, but this could, it could just as easily be Dallas or San Antonio or Austin, which has changed so dramatically over even the last 10 years. And all of these are things that migratory birds, nocturnal migratory birds, did not evolve to deal with, these 100-foot, glass impediments to their journey. So they just don't have the ability to deal with this new barrier. Okay, so I love this slide. These are, it not only does it talk about the elevation or rather the altitude that different groups of birds are migrating at, but also gives a nice graphic for things that they might be running into, and also that estimated mortality. So things like ducks and a lot of shorebirds and some of our really big, strong, long distance flyers, they can really get up there almost to a mile and well beyond. But a lot of our songbirds are quite a bit lower and put in harm's way. And even more important to that risk is when they are not clear skies, or when skies are changing, then that altitude rather, birds will start to drop down. And so residences, it's a huge number, but most of that is daytime collisions. We've all heard that thump on the glass or the door. Power lines, that is a lot of collisions out there. If you ever walked a lot of roads, you've seen what happens to birds that are passing along habitat and hit those lines. Wind turbines is a relatively small number. And if we've got a bunch of bird people on here, that compared to what all the other big causes, wind turbines are not up there even close. Communication towers, 6.6 million, and then the giant number, 340 million on those buildings. And a lot of that is at night as well. And that's where we focus our energy for this particular monitoring effort. Windows. It is our top US bird collision source. It's Yeah, it's even hard to wrap your head around how many there are. But when you put it at the scale of the continent, those numbers add up pretty quickly. Over on the right, you see Flap Canada. They've been at this for quite a while, 25 plus years, I believe. And they do the big layout and really bring that message home. I know the Field Museum in Chicago has been doing a similar monitoring effort as well. So those are seasoned programs. We are new. Great indicator is the spontaneity of this presentation. So we've got the big source of all of that. So cars, power lines, all of those, but buildings and windows is a big one. So it does make sense that is where we're trying to understand what's going on. And I know we can't ramble, but I do want to point this out, that this effort, because I don't think it's anywhere else in this program, is the way that we are setting this up across Texas and trying to make it a consistent survey methodology is set up in a way so that we can answer some of the questions as to, what is it about buildings or skylines or weather. Our sample size is growing enough, and we're trying to get enough, enough sampling, visits out there so that we can begin to understand and then make recommendations to improve and get those building collisions down. All right. So here's the problem. The majority of birds that migrate through Texas are nocturnal migrants, and they are nocturnal migrants that are depending on celestial cues, among other redundant navigation systems. But there is some innate biology that light plays with migration, and it is interfering at times, sometimes more so than others, and which is part of the big mystery that we're trying to figure out. So Houston is number 2 of the 125 largest cities for light pollution, and so that creates quite a bit of exposure to these nocturnally migrating birds. So on top of us having a ton of light pollution, we have an incredible amount of birds as well, which is why Houston and Dallas, Fort Worth, same story, tons of birds, lots of light. We were ranked 2, Dallas was ranked 3. I think Chicago was 1. Is that right, Anna? I think that's right.
They were number 3.
Chicago was Dallas is number 3.
Oh, I meant then Chicago was number 1. Yeah, sorry.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Chicago is number 1. So that's the problem we're trying to address is, can we reduce this, this sky glow that is pulling these birds in and then putting them in harm's way? Not only the harm's way of actually running into something, which is counterintuitive, but also if they are drawn to our area, then they're also put into harm's way in the daytime by outdoor cats, all of these other collisions. So there's a lot to figure out, and fortunately now with more exacting radar work that is available and more radar ornithologists that are able to study it, we can begin to look at those questions with a little finer resolution. Here's just a slide of light pollution. I'm a little surprised the Eagle Shell, Ford Shell down there isn't brighter than what it's showing there south of San Antonio. But there's a lot of light pollution that we're trying to reduce, and we're not deluding ourselves that we're going to reduce that down to nothing, but we are hoping to reduce it some. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm just going to quick kind of do an overview. Richard did a good job of covering most of kind of the dangers, but of collision prevention, because there are 2 main types of collisions that we kind of break our overall collision mortality into, daytime collisions and nighttime collisions. And they have 2 different root causes. So daytime collisions do contribute a lot to like the overall mortality of birds hitting buildings. So we know that up to 1 billion birds die each year after hitting windows in the US alone. And we saw that chart that with the different size buildings, a lot of those are home windows, but also a lot are these reflective windows that we see on that architecturally are very appealing to us. And so windows aren't only just invisible. It's not that birds can't see a window, so they would just continue to fly through, but also the innate ability for windows to reflect, and for our love of putting plants right next to windows causes even more attraction to birds into those windows. So if you have a tree reflected into the glass, that bird's going to go try and land in that reflection, and that is when you start to see a lot of those collisions as well. There's ways to fix this that kind of aren't related to the Lights Out Texas program, but are still definitely related to this presentation. So bird-friendly architecture, trying to address kind of those root causes before you even build the building, is obviously the preferred method for preventing bird window collisions. But there are kind of aftermarket things you can do to buildings. Windows and decals have some success, making sure your blinds are down or that you're removing plants away from windows to help avoid that confusion. And then also strategically placing any bird feeders either really close to windows within 3 feet or farther than 30 feet away. Those can all help kind of tone down the possibility for birds to be flying into especially residential homes. But nighttime collisions is why we're all here. So most North American bird species are migratory, and most of those species migrate at night. And again, 2 billion birds migrate through Texas each year. And like Richard touched on, the light that we send out at night from our cities has the ability to attract the birds into the city and then disorient them once they are in that city, which can cause things like window collisions or exhaustion, leaving them at risk for other dangers. But we really don't, we're just starting to kind of pick away at why this happens, what specifically is causing this behavior, and kind of how we can fix these problems. And so the folks at Cornell and the team, the Birdcast team, are really the driving force behind trying to figure out some of this information and behind this program. And so Birdcast is a really amazing tool. And it was how we started our Lights Out for Birds program back in 2017, was because Richard knew that Birdcast had just come out and that we could use this migration prediction technology to basically inform us when we should be telling people to turn out their lights. And so Birdcast uses radar technology and historical data to predict when migration will be high. And then they publish this information on their website. So you can check every day and see kind of what level of migration you're going to be seeing in your specific area. And more recently, they've implemented Lights Out action alerts. So migration alerts for your city, and they're just right now in Texas. So all of us here kind of get the first sneak at having these automatic alerts. And so you'll get an email that says, hey, migration is high tonight, turn out those lights, keep those cats indoors, tell your neighbors and friends, which is just really kind of the direction we needed to make this an automatic and science-driven tool. And so again, we used this tool starting in 2017 after a mass mortality event at a building in Galveston. We had 400 plus songbirds collide with one building one spring evening. And so that building reached out to Houston Audubon and wanted to know what they could do to prevent this from ever happening again. These buildings that we work with that have these problems don't want to be picking up dead birds. They want to, can you still see my screen?
Yes.
I got like a little alert. But these birds want to learn how to prevent this, because it's not only really just kind of a bummer from being a building manager's perspective, but it also is bad PR for buildings. Nobody wants to be the bird killing building. So they will oftentimes ask for help and want to kind of learn and apply new technologies and then behaviors to prevent bird collisions from happening in the future. And so again, the history of Lights Out 2020, we really kicked off our partnership with other organizations across the state of Texas. And there are so many partners. doing really great work, not only doing collision monitoring like you all hear, but also reaching out to their city governments and making sure that buildings in their cities and their neighbors all know about Lights Out and are participating, especially during those peak migration periods that Richard talked about. Back to you, Richard.
Okay. This is a busy chart, this graphic. But what's really beautiful about it is that, you know, if you'll look down on the bottom with that little purple 19 days, you know, what that's telling us is that, you know, 50% of that bulk of migrants that are coming through are happening between April 19th and May 7th. That is a lot of birds. If you're a birder, you know this. End of April, 1st of May is the best time to go birding for migrants, especially on the coast. But you know, here it is quantified, and you know, we can say, you know, with some nice science in our back pocket that, hey, we're asking you to turn your lights out, not only for the peak, but you know, ideally it would be the whole, you know, the whole period of time that, you know, so we can, you know, do, if you want to do the full helping action, then you know, it's the whole spring migration period. But if you're not able to do all of that, or maybe you just dim them part of the season and then you're going, you know, totally lights out as much as you can, then those 19 days are the days that we're asking, you know, for individuals, companies, you know, to do what they can to lower the light pollution. And so, you know, that focusing on that area in the, you know, in the purple and blues there, that's, you know, we're talking 2 billion birds are heading north, and a big chunk of that is going through Texas.
I'll just chime in. The fall peak migration is a lot more kind of extended, just because of the nature of spring migration is a race. Fall migration is kind of like everybody kind of heads back.
It's a lollygag. Yeah,
lollygag,
sure.
Yeah. So the peak migration for fall for Texas is September 5th through October 29th. So it is a longer period of time, but fall migration actually started, we say, around mid-August. So we're just now in the very beginning of fall migration, even though it feels like summer.
Right. And anecdotally, you know, I know on the coast we're now hearing about some of the migrants, like yellow warblers were in Smith Oaks today, and I finally heard some chips up high today, so it's starting to pick up for fall migration.
Well, there's that information. Got ahead of myself.
Go ahead.
All right, let's see.
Oh, I'll do this. So you know, this is a great map, and you know, this average peak migration correlates very strongly with green up as well. So you know, as our planet is tilting toward the sun, you know, this green up is washing northward, and you know, the birds are chasing it, you know, to their breeding grounds. And so for us here in Texas, you know, that's between April, you know, 25th and you know, like even May 3rd up in the Panhandle. So that's a cool graphic. Peak migration, yeah. All right, and finally, get your phone out. I did this today to check it, and it worked. And maybe I doubled up on getting the alerts, but I did do it again. And so you can sign up for the alerts here, and it'll give you the choice when you register to choose which cities that you want to receive alerts for. And so I chose Houston, Galveston, and Seaside, which is another one of the bird cities that they included. So this is the kind of information that you'll get. You know, this is all based on, you know, Van Dorn and Horton's model. It's location specific. It gives you a low, medium, high intensity of migration, you know, on the left there, and it just gives you some quick actions, and then it also gives you a forecast of, you know, of what's to come, to kind of, you know, if you're having to, you know, inform your family as well while you've turned the front porch light off and the garage light off, then you can just show them this and say, hey, I'm just, I'm following the alerts. Or if you're telling your boss, or if you're the operations manager of your skyscraper, then, you can use this and you can say, hey, I gotta go dim the lights. So pretty cool. Save that for later if you couldn't get through it all.
Yeah, well, we can put the links in towards the end of the chat. Sure. Okay, so now that we're halfway through, we're gonna dive into actually kind of what you're here to get trained on. We hope we've inspired you to be super passionate about lights out and collision monitoring. Now we're gonna train you how to do it. So Richard kind of touched on this, but there's a statewide plan that the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and Oklahoma State University and Texan by Nature has kind of come up with the partners' input. And so we are collision monitoring the same exact way across the state. And this data will serve as a baseline to compare bird collision rates and then disentangle why birds are dying this way. This is also a goal, is to increase education and awareness efforts, and hopefully seeing a statewide decrease in the number of bird building collisions. So that is like the goal, right? At the end of this, we can use this data and save birds from dying this way. And again, when you are out and about on your collision routes, we like to say this is not a name and shame game. The people working in those buildings are not at fault. They're just there working, and the goal is to collect this data to understand what's going on, to then help those buildings make some small changes or big changes and be able to address the collisions that might be happening on their doorsteps. And okay, so I want to start off with you all as volunteers. There is expected behavior that is listed in the volunteer guide that we will share with you at the end of this, but please respect the privacy of all building occupants and staff. We're basically trying to do this research without causing any alarm. So peeking into windows or really like going into non-reserved areas or anything like that is not the best way to keep friendly relationships with the people whose building we're surveying. Also, during this time, limit the use of mobile devices so people don't think that you're out there to do that name and shame thing that we kind of mentioned. And on that note, try not to post any information about this on social media, listservs, especially when calling out buildings. That is a surefire way to lose access to those buildings and to kind of end the data collection in that location. Also,
or even bias the sampling.
Or bias, yep.
Because then the building might intentionally send their cleaning crews out, 30 minutes earlier. So yeah, we want to be neutral. And we're not doing this underhanded. We're in public space, and if anything, we want to build a relationship, with the people that are working at these buildings.
Yes. And then finally, handle all of the casualties and the injured birds according to the protocol in this training, and make sure you let your whoever is leading your region's collision monitoring, tell them that you have attended training, and then make sure to review the protocol right before you go out again, just so it's fresh in your mind. So everyone will be provided a kit when they're going out surveying. And so the kit's going to contain a few things. It will contain the volunteer guide, and then it'll also contain all of the supplies you could need for collecting a specimen for one of those birds who did not make it. In Houston this past year, we had 19 birds that actually collided, our volunteers found, that had collided with buildings but were alive. And so we made sure they had all the supplies for handling injured birds as well. And we made sure also to touch base with our local rehabilitation centers and to bring those birds back to them so they could potentially survive and be re-released back in the wild. Other things that will be in your kits are your appropriate permits and identification, and also data sheets and tags. So all of this will kind of go into how to complete a survey. All right, so ideally, surveys are completed every morning during the peak migration period, once a day, with the direction of the survey changing each day. So if there is a loop that one route walks, you're going to walk that loop once clockwise, and then the next day it'll be counterclockwise. And then you're going to kind of adjust. So if you start on building 1, you're going to start on building 2 the following day, and then building 3 the day after that. And that's to avoid biasing our data collection, because if you are finding more birds first thing in the morning before cleaning crews go out there, you don't want to assume that the reason you're finding more birds is because of a building, not because of the timing of beating the cleaning crews to the birds. And the survey should be kind of done in a consistent, other than those, a consistent manner each day. You kind of learn your route and you walk around the buildings and you know how you walked the last time. And so the survey width is going to vary based on how tall the building is. So for 6 stories or less, the bird will probably bounce back only about 6 feet away from the building. But with some of the skyscrapers that many of the cities have that are much more than 6 stories, 16 feet away is a better survey route to kind of walk around. And you want to search everywhere you can, above, like in vegetation, so in well, as high as you can get in trees, in bushes, in planters like pots, below, under bushes, in rocky areas, and then all kind of around. And we know birds are sometimes really hard to see, especially brown birds who maybe aren't in their colorful spring plumage. They're going to be tricky if there is a dead bird on brown leaves and it is a brown bird. So try and get your search image ready and really do a thorough walk around all of these buildings. And then the less fun thing is that we need to survey rain or shine. Obviously, if there is a hurricane, we're not asking anybody to go out where conditions are dangerous, but it's important to understand the impact of weather on some of these collision events. And often you'll see the really big collision events do happen when there has been some kind of storm or weather in that area. So rain or shine is another one. And Richard, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. So museums can get quite a bit of great data from these casualties. So there's an opportunity here. So of course we want to make sure that these birds are collected, identified, and counted and put in the right location. But we also want to take advantage of getting this specimen for museums so that it can, for hundreds of years into the future, provide valuable data to researchers. And the amount of data that are collected from museums is only growing, and they are very active sources of.
Richard froze. And I'm gonna guess he was saying active sources of like taxonomic information, but Richard,
can you hear me now?
Yeah, now you're good.
Okay, so sorry, I'm waxing reminiscent there, coming from a museum, but they're very important to museums for all the taxonomic information, but the DNA, everything, what they're eating, all kinds of questions can be learned from doing a necropsy and preparing study scans and getting tissue samples, you name it. But we do want, we will, in Texas, we're sharing those specimens with Texas A&M. So they have, we have our permits are in place, and so we've got our routes to get them collected and all bundled and shipped up to College Station. So that does reduce the overall need for active collecting, which there isn't much of that happening anymore because of all this passive. All right. So how do we do that? You will be provided with a daily survey log to complete in the field. As you find one of these birds, on the ground, you got to keep your own sequential list of casualty identification numbers. So that's your first initial, middle initial, last initial. So REG1 would be my, and then the date. So here's my casual ID. So Heather L. Prestridge, HLP 01, an orange-crowned warbler at 1902 Market Street, and the condition is good. So I'll talk about that. So if, good condition would be like, it looks like a bird, and it's not, crumpled up or anything. Let's say that a predator, like a cat or something, or who knows what, has, gotten to that before a person has, then, that might be why the condition's bad. Or if they've really left a mess, then, if it's just a feather pile or remnants, then, that would be that condition. Make sure you get your data in at the top, and the city where you're doing that work.
I'll just say, we're going to be asking, especially in Houston, and maybe you'll get different directions from the other cities, but I'm asking this time, we fill out the iNaturalist, which I'll walk through, app, and a data sheet for every survey. Even if you don't find any surveys, it's good to have a data sheet that you have filled out the city, your name and the date, so we can make sure that, oh, okay, yeah, we have official record of people were out there, even if we didn't find anything.
We're not just missing a data sheet.
Yep.
Good point.
Okay.
All right. So here's the collection. You can do this if you want. Go ahead. I mean, if you're planning on going.
No, all good. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's find the dead bird. And this is what I consider the hard part. So finding the dead bird is the hardest part of your whole job. And you can talk about picking it up and everything else, Richard.
Okay. So, and I don't know, go ahead and go to the next, looking for it too. Yeah, there we go. So for the protocol, so when you get that bird, there are some nosocomial disease. No, that's a zoonotic diseases that can be transferred from birds to people. So, when you're picking these birds up or dealing with them, just use the Ziploc inverted, to get the bird into a place where you can, into a safe place where you can start getting this information gathered. So you should have a collection tag like this will come in your kit. So just go ahead and fill that out very quick, get your Sharpie, and go ahead in case this gets wet and the information inside is somehow destroyed. We have some redundancy, so use your Sharpie and write on the outside of that Ziploc as well. The species, the collector, put your ID on there, location and date. Those are the most important data to get on that specimen. And yeah, make sure you fill in all of those. We can go ahead and go to the next one. All right. So I guess maybe we weren't great at this last time. So we're really, mentioning this. We really need you to get that ID filled out when you're uploading that to iNaturalist. And that's it. And because we're cross-referencing these things, it's really important that we get that number, into your iNaturalist record that Anna will talk you through here in just a second.
Yeah, so there's 3 spots where this exact same number should be. It should be on your data sheet, on that specimen ID tag, and in iNaturalist. And then we can just match everything together super nicely.
Yeah. All right, so when you get the bird, we need a dorsal view. We need a side view. And we also need this ventral view, and that will help us in case there's, a miss ID, then, we can have something to go back and check. And also we need to get that GPS coordinates. Most phones have a GPS now, or free apps are pretty easy. And I know that GPS coordinates are usually taken as well with iNaturalist as well. And yeah, if you can get that specimen tag in the photo, that helps a lot. It adds yet another redundancy for that code. All right. I know Anna really enjoyed finding this graphic for us. And I'm guessing you didn't find one for an actual bird in our bags, but much as you would pick up after your canine friends, or feline friends, you will pick up the bird with this inverted Ziploc, and that is a true LBJ there, little brown job, and put it in the Ziploc, and then continue with your data collection. Oh my gosh, this is really important. So genetic material and the insides of this bird really break down quickly. So you got to get these things cooled off as quickly as possible so that they have maximum value to the scientists that are going to prep and study these specimens. So get them to the cooler just as soon as you can. You don't have to break up your and run off to the car and put it, run it to, liquid nitrogen or anything, but you should have a cooler and with some ice in there as well, I believe, Anna. Yeah. Really important downstream use. You should have your soft side coolers that we've got 3 kits here in Houston that we've bought an extra kit so we can make sure that the handoff and that sort of thing isn't so onerous on our volunteers. And then we'll get them into the freezer as quickly as possible at your drop off, and we'll transfer those specimens to the volunteer coordinator to store, and then we will get them on up the road to the museum in College Station.
Cool. Thanks, Richard. Okay.
Yeah.
So now data entry. We already talked about the filling out the data sheets. And again, it's important to do that every time you go out, even if you don't find anything, because the 0 is still data. Okay. The other part of this is using iNaturalist, and the folks at TPWD have set up a wonderful Lights Out Texas monitoring project, and that QR code will bring you right to it on your phone. If you would like to do that now, the links will also be in the volunteer guide. And so the data sheets really do serve as a backup to the iNaturalist. There's always issues with technology and service and all these things. So iNaturalist will be where we go to first, and then we will double check everything based on your data sheets. All right, so I'm just gonna run through all of these slides are from Tanya Hamoyan from TPWD, she's the project coordinator who does a lot of the iNaturalist stuff. And I personally am not an iNaturalist expert. I have used it quite a bit. So if you have any really specific questions at the end of this section, I will provide her contact information. And she is so great. She will tell you exactly how to fix any of your problems. I have used her as a resource many times. So iNaturalist, for those of you who don't know, it's a lot like eBird, if we have birders on here. And it is a citizen community science app. And you record your observations and upload them. And then your fellow naturalists will be able to comment and kind of suggest an ID if you don't automatically know what it is you're looking at. And it all goes into a database that helps us kind of know where things are in the world. iNaturalist is available across the globe. And so with each observation, you create a digital voucher for presence of a species. And so then we can look at, and scientists can download this data and measure species richness and distribution, but it does not measure populations because it's not a all-encompassing thing. And it does not measure absence. But dead stuff counts too. And so that's why we are using this, because a bird who is dead on the ground means that bird was there of its own on its way, and it is a voucher for that species in that location. And so there are different types of projects in iNaturalist, but we're going to be mostly working with a collection project. Oh. Well, I said, never mind, we're working with a traditional project. Collection project is something different, I guess. But so this is what the website for iNaturalist looks like when you're in that Lights Out Texas monitoring project. And again, that QR code will take you to this website. And so all of this past spring's data is in there, and it's really cool to kind of look around. When I was curious what people were finding without having to actually go through the birds in Houston, I immediately saw that oven birds were like the most common species that were colliding with buildings in Houston. We weren't even finished with the period of collision monitoring, and I could already start to see these patterns. And so I'm going to quickly run through this with you because there's a couple key things that you need to do when you set up your profile to make sure that Houston Audubon and Texan by Nature and all of our partners can access that data that you upload well. So first, if you are not already an iNaturalist member, you can do this when you get off this call. you can go and join iNaturalist, but you're going to want to make sure that your default time zone is your local time zone. We had some issues in Houston where people's time zones, it looked like they found birds at like 3 in the afternoon when we know they were out there at like 7 a.m. doing their survey. And so be sure to set it to your local time zone so that data is appropriately marked. This is kind of what your profile will look like if you are in the iNaturalist website, and up in that right-hand corner is where you can click, and then you'll have all of your different settings and everything. So you can edit your observations up there. You can find what projects you're already a part of, and also do your account settings. So if you are already an iNaturalist user, you can go and change, and you're not sure that you have the time setting correctly, you can go and check that in your account settings. Where that was just highlighted, we'll show you where people ID your birds or comment on them if you upload birds, if you upload other things too. And then you can look at your profile and kind of set it up to really talk about who you are and why you're doing iNaturalist. And again, if you edit your settings, you can see that time zone, and you can set that appropriately to wherever you are. We're going to be all central time zone here. So make sure you got central time zone set. The other thing that you guys should check on your iNaturalist kind of backend is that you have your project settings set to where you can add your projects to any, you can add your observations to any project, and this will help us be able to actually access that data on the other end. My dogs are running in here like crazy. Sorry about that. Okay, and then if you have problems with your data, you can always go back in and edit sightings. If something didn't load right, or if you forgot to do your time setting, you can go and batch edit and fix the problems. So you may have one of your leads, it might be me in Houston, kind of reach out to you after you've uploaded a sighting and say, hey, would you mind going and adjusting your observation so it displays the right time zone, or so the pictures are all together, or something like that. So that's how you can do that. All right, joining projects, it's pretty easy. Again, I provide that QR code, and we will provide the link again. You go to projects, you're gonna Google Lights Out Texas, or you're gonna search Lights Out Texas, and then you can click that Lights Out Texas. It's got the Texan by Nature logo on it, and at the, where is it? No, my computer is way ahead of me. All right, so this is what the project page will look like. Up at the top right corner, you'll see join this project. It's tiny and easy to miss, but once you click that, your observations will get loaded into that project when you toggle it on in the app. Okay, and again, so you're gonna wanna select yes, but only if I add the observations to the project myself, if you would like to do that, because that'll let you look at, identify other things, and it not automatically get added into the Lights Out Texas project. If you select the private obscured coordinates, it'll be hard for the Lights Out Texas monitoring project to be able to know where your bird was collected. So you want to be able to share those coordinates as much as possible. So yes, I would like to, you want to say, yes, I want to give these people who are part of this project the coordinates of my observations. And so, cases where you would want private or obscure coordinates are things like if you know where a sensitive species is located and you don't want to project that to the world, you may want to obscure the coordinates so people, ne'er-do-wells, don't go and try and mess with that species or something like that. Also, if you're worried about where people tracking your location for normal things, you may want to turn that off. Okay, don't forget to click the last button. Tanya's thorough. Most of you will be working in the app, and I almost never use the iNaturalist website unless I'm going back in to edit my sightings that I've uploaded through the app. You can join the the Lights Out Texas monitoring project via the app, so you don't even have to log into iNaturalist on your computer if you don't want to. Where that leave button is, if you aren't already a member, it'll say join. When you go on your survey, you have your iNaturalist app downloaded, you are joined, you're into this project. you are going to find a bird, and then you're going to say, time to upload my data. And to do this for the Lights Out Texas Monitoring Project, you're going to hit that projects button. And that will bring you to the page with all of your projects. And you can see I did City Nature Challenge, and we don't really want to add it to City Nature Challenge. We want to add it to Lights Out Texas Monitoring. And so you will toggle that little toggle button on. It'll look slightly different for Android, but it'll be pretty much the same vibe. Once that little toggle is on, it opens up all of these other categories for you to fill in. So you'll know if you don't have a spot to put your survey route ID or a casualty ID, you don't have your button toggled on yet. So once you have it toggled on, you're going to put your survey route ID. We call ours Downtown Houston. The building name or building address, you will have a list of these because you'll be used to going and checking the same buildings, same 10 buildings every time. And this particular category confused a lot of people, and I totally understand why. Number of individuals is not the number of people who were out surveying with you. So in Houston, we always tried to do buddy systems. So 2 or 3 people were always out surveying every morning for us. It is if you find a bunch of birds of all the same species all together, that's when you're going to put number of individuals. So 3, if I found 3 pine siskins, that is when you will put that number there. We only found 1 pine. If you only found 1 pine siskin, that number would be a 1. The casualty box will have a bunch of different options like fatal, injured, feather pile. And so most of your birds will probably, if you found them, be a fatal collision. And then disposition of casualty. So this would be photo and collect, because in most cases, you're going to take pictures and collect that bird. There is another option. If you found a pile of feathers, the pile of feathers is not the most useful thing for the museum. So we don't collect piles of feathers under this protocol. So there would be another option to where it says photo and did not collect. And so you don't need to collect those feather piles. You can just say, hey, I took a picture of it. I did not collect it because I know that this is not worth the effort, basically. And again, that casualty ID. So I'm ACV, and this was my first pine siskin, my first 3 pine siskins, according to this. And I'm saying that that is sighting number 1. And I would bag those 3 birds that were all landed in a little flock together. They must have all gone together. I bag them together, put my specimen ID tag in, write the specimen casualty ID on the outside of the baggie with a Sharpie, and then plug in that data.
And get it on ice.
And get it on ice, exactly. Remember, okay, and we had a good question in the chat. Do you start your casualty ID new every time? And I personally would try to keep it going, like if you're surveying every 3rd day, to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you forget and you start over at 1, it's probably okay because that'll be a separate day. But try and just keep each bird its own individual ID number. So, or if I go out and I'm like, okay, I had 3 birds last time, but really I had 2 and I skipped a bird. That's okay if you have, didn't ever collect HLP 03. If you went straight to 4, that's okay. At least that bird has its own unique identification number.
Yeah.
So that's the
and
goal.
make a note.
Yep. Again, having that data sheet allows research institutions to download the iNaturalist data and match it up and compare it to what we have in a physical form. And your volunteer coordinator will have different preferences for this. Check in and follow their rules. I like to know that people have done their survey, so I get a check-in email each day, but it's up to the people who are in your community. Again, iNaturalist questions. I know that was probably kind of complicated, and I'm not the most iNaturalist friendly. Tanya Hamoyan is great. She is on iNaturalist, so you can become friends with her and message her there. That's her username. This is also her email address. So after this, if you were like, I can't remember her email address, you can also shoot me an email and I can connect you to her. All right, Richard, all you.
Okay. So collisions don't always end in fatalities. So if maybe it's a glancing blow, or they were slow, or they, it's just, you've got a bird and it's either stunned and maybe it just needs some time to regain its wits, or it may have an injury that it's not going to recover from without some assistance. So if you find these birds and they're still alive, we are prepared to help. All right, and so we're going to prepare you with what you need. We have a small cardboard box or a flat bottom paper bag to keep these injured birds. The reason is, we don't want to confine the bird, but we also want it to be dark. That calms the birds, and it is a sensory deprivation, is why we recommend these small dark places, so that they don't want to fly around in a bigger place, and it's mobile, so we can carry it. Some type of paper towel or non-terry cloth fabric where they might get their toes caught, that if you can put that in the bottom of that box, that'll give them something to hold on to. A lot of these are perching birds. They're not great at standing up on slippery cardboard box bottoms. We'll also have some hand sanitizer or gloves, some nitrile gloves for handling those birds, and we may have a net. So if some birds are still mobile, but they're not volant or able to fly, then a net is an option as well for catching some of those birds, and some tape to close that top. You're not trying to make an airtight seal or anything, but you also don't want it to accidentally come open and spill the box or something. So it just gives you a bit of insurance, of surety that it's secured. All right, so when you are approaching a bird, you want to do this as quickly and with as little fanfare as possible. It's usually, if you've been a mist netter, what I do is I go in with a bander's grip, those two fingers right over the head, and it's a quick grab, and then you don't want to squeeze hard, but you're holding that bird, and they know that that there's not much reason to try to struggle. But you're not just walking around and having a great loud conversation. You're quiet from the perspective of the bird that is already injured and having a really bad day. It thinks that an enormous predator is about to eat it. So what we do is we are calm, and we grab the bird and we get it as soon as possible into the box. We don't need to give it food or water because we're not very good at it. We could put it down the windpipe and just cause more problems. And the sooner we can get it to the professionals, for us, it's the Wildlife Center of Texas, and each of the different areas will have a designated place for birds that need to be rehabilitated. And then you can document that as an injured bird, and maybe your partner that is with you, can get that photo. This is not let's spend the next 5 minutes and get some photos of this injured bird. But if somebody else wants to get a quick picture while you're, transferring it to the box, then, that would be helpful for the iNaturalist record observation. So there's a field in the project called Casualty, where they can, non-fatal stun, non-fatal injured. So then you would select those other two. All right, so then hopefully, this has happened a couple of ways where, somebody might peel off from the group and just take it to the rehabilitator. But you can, if you're close to the end, then you go ahead and finish your survey and get them to the rehabilitation center. We'll give you all that information on where that is. And if you're here in Houston, you may already know where the Wildlife Center of Texas is, and just plug it in. Okay, sure. Go ahead.
All right, cool. And so in now we're going to talk about how you kind of sign up. And this is going to be different for every city. These are the collision monitoring contacts for the main cities in Texas. If you are from a community that is not one of these communities, we have a contact that'll be on the next slide for you to reach out to. And it's Taylor Keys with Texan by Nature, and she can connect you with the people who are closest to wherever you are who are doing collision monitoring. So here in Houston, it's me and Richard, and I will put a sign up sheet in the chat at the end of this for the Houston folks. I know we probably have, I saw an Austin person. Kaylee Zuzula with Travis Audubon is the contact for there, and that is her email address. And yeah, if you don't see your community, sorry. We have a contact for you, and my dogs are losing their mind. And so this info at Texan by Nature, you can email that email address, and they will figure out who you are closest to. Other contacts, if you are interested and just kind of curious, these are the folks who are behind the actual use of the collected specimens. Those are Heather Prestridge at A&M and Mike Harvey in El Paso, if you're way out in West Texas. And then the folks who are behind the collision monitoring and study design are Andrew Farnsworth with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and Scott Lost with Oklahoma State University. And if you want more information about getting involved with the Lights Out Texas program, Julia Wang at with Cornell Lab, she's the Birdcast project lead. And if you want more information about anything else, Taylor Keys, Texan by Nature, really is a great contact. And she's kind of the person who's keeping us all working together and getting everything taken care of. So there was a question asking if I would send out this slide deck. I'm happy to. I will send out the slide deck to all the participants. If you would put your email address, just in case I don't have it in the chat before you leave, I will be sure to send that to you soon. So we're almost there. We're almost opening things up for more questions, but this QR code will bring you to a Google version of the volunteer guide. So yeah, we all know QR codes now. In the time of COVID, we are all too familiar with the QR code, but that volunteer guide has everything we went over here and more. And it's got all the links you could need, and it's got detailed step-by-step what to do and supplies you'll need and everything like that. So things we learned last year in Houston were get out earlier versus later. All right, yes. So the maintenance folks around the downtown Houston buildings, and I'm sure this is the same in Austin, San Antonio, and Dallas, and El Paso, they get out there before it's light out. And so it's a toss-up between beating the maintenance crews and being able to see birds. And so your kit should theoretically have flashlights in it, so you could get out there before sunrise and start your search. But the earlier the better. And be nice to the maintenance crews if you see them out there, because in Houston, we ended up having conversations with a few of the folks who are doing the cleanup, the morning cleanup, and they started to purposefully leave the birds in place for us and show us where the birds were when we got there. So there can be nice relationships that come from this, especially when people are like, what are those people doing with backpacks wandering around at 6 a.m.? Right.
Yeah. So, I tended to say, hey, I'm a wildlife biologist. We're trying to understand, why these migratory birds are running into buildings. So, we're not trying to cause problems for any of the particular buildings. We're trying to understand the biology of this issue. And so, if you can get their guard down, they can be helpful, or maybe at least not be working against you.
Yep. I will also send this link if you are having issues with your QR codes. I'll do a nice link compilation and send it to everybody who's put their email address in the chat. Finally, if you're like, man, I need Anna to answer 5 more questions after this, that's my email address. I'm going out of town on Friday, so if you get me an email today or tomorrow, I will respond. But after that, Richard's your guy for any
Happy to do
collision
it.
monitoring questions. So thank you all for attending, and now we will happily take any questions. And I'm going to I kind of answered them in the chat as they came in, but I'm sure I missed some. So yeah, I'm going to stop sharing and then look at the chat. And feel free if you have questions to unmute yourself or put them in the chat. I'm fine with either way.
Anna?
Yes.
Yes, you mentioned that you've formed relationships with some cleanup crews, and that was going to be my question. Is there sort of an overall effort, maybe by the organization, to contact cleaning companies, cleaning crews, and building owners to encourage them to leave these birds on?
Yeah, so that's going to be totally dependent on the city. This is one of the big questions that I had for the group as a whole from after our spring collision monitoring, the group as a whole being the folks at Cornell and Oklahoma State and other cities, because we were having we didn't forge relationships with the buildings beforehand, kind of intentionally, so they wouldn't go out ahead of us and clean up the birds and beat us to it. But I'm thinking, after talking to several of the maintenance crews during the last effort, that it would be a beneficial thing to reach out to the buildings beforehand and kind of really come at them with information and sharing and getting everything out on the table. So the answer to that is we have relationships with about half of the buildings in Houston right now, and we don't with the other half. And this is something, after a full year of collision monitoring, we'll be addressing with the planning group. Not a great answer.
Thank you.
I saw Sophia asked, are these numbers annual mortality in the US as a whole? And I think all of the original, this was during the first section, all about kind of collisions. All of that information was the US. It was an annual US data is typically what's presented for like the 1 billion birds that collide with windows. And I think those data that you were talking about, Richard, on the different building
North
types.
and south.
No,
Yeah,
types.
Generally they split out US and Canada just because they're developing those numbers for different wildlife agencies. So yeah, I think those collision numbers were for US.
Mm-hmm.
The year-to-year measuring of the total birds killed, how do you measure year-to-year the light pollution in a particular city?
Gonna be radar, I think.
Yeah, that is a question that I have asked to to Ross at Oklahoma State and Andrew, is like, what is our, how can we measure that? And right now, I don't know that we have a good answer. I know for Houston, we're, it's anecdotal at this point, but I would imagine that there are, remote data being gathered, from the hundreds of satellites are up there. I mean, I know that we're constantly gathering data for, LiDAR and all these other things. So I know that light is also being measured, but I don't know if, I don't know how to measure that per city, but I think it is going to be something we'll be able to measure in hindsight. Another way to do that, a more, there are also some known sources of light that are on and off, really big sources of light, like stadiums and things like that. So I think another way to get at, the effect of birds and being attracted or not will be with, focused efforts. For example, if you look at the 9/11 memorial, they've studied and have radar there as well, this micro radar, and you can see the birds when they've got the lights on at the memorial. They come in, they start circling, they're in it. You can measure them on the radar, and then they finally get to a point when everything's calling like crazy because they're just they're stressed out and they're getting lower, that they turn the lights off, and then the calling frequency slows down and all the birds dissipate, and you can see it and record it on the radar. So we know that we've got NEXRAD, these side-facing radars that are gathering data constantly here. And there are some of these smaller radars that can be deployed, for some focused questions. But we're as we said earlier, we are at the front of trying to understand, some of these questions and still discovering all the tools that can help us answer them.
Thank you.
Right.
Question from Natasha is about correlations between number of collisions and building material height, etc. So building material, thinking, if we have these mostly glass facade buildings versus maybe some of the older buildings which were might be more of a concrete structure or something like that. Not to my knowledge. If so, it's going to be, it'll be something, out of Canada, or I would guess Chicago or New York have the most data where they can look at that. But I'm not aware of that. But it's a great question, and I think we do need to get a lit search so we can start understanding more of that. We're going to put that on the to-do list for Scott and Julia to help us get all of those papers in one place.
Nina, I see your hands raised.
Yeah, thanks. So thanks for the training and presentation, and I am just interested in volunteering for the first time. So had a question about the sign up process.
For sure.
I just want to figure out, whether I can do this and how you schedule and how much control you have as a volunteer.
Yes. So in Houston, and I can only speak to Houston, this will be a different process depending on who's coordinating it on the other cities. But in Houston, we have a sign up sheet that once you are trained, which you are all now trained, I
know you feel totally different now.
Yeah, you could. I'm putting it in the chat right now. For Houston, that volunteersignup.org link is where we encourage people to sign up. And you can sign up for as many days or as few days as you want. We do hope that people sign up for 2 or 3 days in a row to help ease the facilitation of passing the kit on to the next person. So we have a limited number of kits. And so it becomes kind of the hardest part, I think, of managing a large volunteer group effort like this is making sure that I survey on Monday, how does the Tuesday person get that kit? Or where do I leave it to drop it off for them? So that's why we're hoping 2 or 3 days. And we asked 2 or 3 people to sign up. So maybe we could stagger it and kind of do a nice handoff. But we can always jump in and help with the handoff of the kit. So I hope that answers your question. This is a no pressure sign up situation. You all are wonderful, amazing volunteers. So even if you just want to go out for 1 day, we will still have you.
Great, thanks. That's really helpful. And I assume that you just sign up for a day. You don't have to bring your partner or second and third person. Nope. You'll just get matched with somebody.
Yes. Cool. It's a nice social event to go out in the morning and meet people. The group, I did ask the group from spring to sign up for some of the days in the early part of this monitoring, so they could theoretically be the experienced person to kind of help lead the group. So you might see, I sent that to them like an hour ago, so you might see them signing up for those early days too.
All right, Diane's got a question about if he doesn't know what the bird is, you can say unidentified bird. That's why you're taking the photos. You could even just text it to, you've got our phone numbers, and we get these emails and texts pretty much every day. And, hey, what bird is this? And, often we can do it. It's a little tougher in the fall with some of the, the tougher plumages. But, if you don't know, just say, unidentified bird, and that's fine.
I will also say iNaturalist, when you upload your photos, if you get a really good photo, will provide suggestions of what it could be. And so sometimes those are like spot on, and sometimes they are so wrong. It's hilarious. But it might help you kind of get to the right spot. And if you say unknown, just leave it unknown across the board and we'll come through. Again, biologists will be looking at these collected specimens in the lab. and doing DNA on them.
Yeah.
So there is
And
no
I'll tell
way-
you,
Yeah.
the person at the museum is going to ignore your ID anyway.
Yep.
And do it themselves. And if they can get a true ID after a bad field ID, then they're feeling better about it.
Yeah. And then I did get a question, how long does a survey typically last? And it again depends on your city. And I'm sorry that that's the answer for everything, but in Houston, we expected it was about a 2-hour walk. It was about 2.5 to 3 miles around downtown. If you don't find very many birds, and that can really get longer if you find a ton. But if anybody like goes out and they discover a mass mortality event like we've had in Galveston and Philadelphia had last fall, that's a good time to call your lead and get help, because that's going to be a different methodology of collections. So if you discover hundreds of birds, please call your city lead. But otherwise, you should expect 2 to 3 hours.
Hey, Anna, I live out in the suburbs. Where am I going to park? I'm scared to go downtown and park my car.
Yeah. In Houston, we have 2 spots donated for the duration of the monitoring. And we also provide other alternative parking spots closer to the starting point, depending on, we said we're going to start at a different building every day. So if you want to start at one end, we're going to provide, and whoever you're talking to should help provide good parking locations as well.
Do you focus on one side of the building, the direction of migration, or do you look around the entire building?
So this is another great question, and one I have asked as well. We went into this thinking we would survey the sides of the building that we knew were, you'll notice when you're downtown, some of the buildings have awnings or they're multi-tiered. And so certain sides of the building, you will not be able to see birds, even if they collide, because they'll land up on a roof. So we were suggested that our volunteers skip those sides of those buildings. When you could see there was an obvious, like, if anything hits that building, it's going to land on that roof right there or on that parking garage. Skip those sides, but we have been surveying all the other sides of the buildings.
Yeah. And one reason for that is, in addition to, coming from the prevailing direction, in the early morning, there is this phenomenon called morning flight, where, birds will, reposition themselves, hopefully into, better habitat for the day. It's like, oh man, I put down here, bad choice. I'm going to go try to find a better place. So they could be going in any direction. So it is worth checking all available sites.
And you'll find a lot of mourning doves.
And white-winged doves.
Yeah, white-winged doves. It's not just migratory birds that are colliding with buildings. There are a lot of our resident birds that was a lot of them, a lot of doves. So, and they can be on any side of the building.
I think it's like anything. I don't think it's the bison bag.
Okay, in Houston, are we monitoring just downtown or other areas like Greens Point and Galleria? Great question. We, this past spring, had a Med Center Rice U survey and a Galveston survey. We don't have the bandwidth this fall to do those. So once we really dial in how this monitoring protocol goes, we are going to hopefully start establishing routes in because Houston has like 4 downtown areas, like you pointed out. The Galleria is like its own entity. So we hope to start covering those areas as well. But that's not this year, just due to resources.
Time.
Yep. Well, cool. I very much appreciate everybody staying on and asking such fun questions and being interested in doing collision monitoring. We really believe in this project and the data that it can provide, and hopefully the conservation it can inform. So you all are the on the ground field biologists, because there's no way we could be in all these cities at once collecting this data. So again, my email address is avalerie@houstonaudubon.org. Richard's are Gibbons, and you can find those on the Houston Audubon website. please send us questions if you have them, and I saved all of your email addresses, and I will be sending out all the links and this slide deck, probably tomorrow morning. So
Just
cool. All right.
Get me a thing so I have it.
Well, I hope you all have a good night, and we will see ya out there. See you out there surveying.
Thanks, everyone.